Us, we do have an expert with us to discuss these issues. Our guest today is Mr. Arun Seenath. He's a council member at the Institute of Chartered Accountants of TNT, also known as ICATT for short, and he's also chairman of the ICATT Taxation Committee. Mr. Seenath holds a non-audit practicing certificate and is a partner at Deloitte and Touche and leads the Taxation and Business Process Services Department for that firm. He has 20 years of experience in public accounting. He has also done work in the areas of audit and assurance, information technology, and risk advisory for several local and multinational companies in a number of industries. Now, his focus within the area of tax encompasses international consulting, tax planning, due diligence, mergers and acquisitions, and international assignee services. Mr. Seenath also works with a number of volunteer organizations throughout the country. Please welcome him to our discussion here today. Mr. Seenath, how are you?
Hi, evening, Sarah. Evening to all the listeners. Just let me know if you hear me clearly.
I am indeed hearing you. Thank you for joining us. I know it's a very busy period for you. You would have, just like I did moments ago, taken in that budget presentation almost 4 hours long. I will start with the obvious question, which is what was your first impression at the end of it? What are your thoughts coming out of this budget presentation?
Well, Sarah, I never envy the Minister of Finance. I've always told interested persons that for the last 7 years, the state of the economy and the state of the global economy has been a difficult one. So taking over the reins from the previous government, he's always had a very difficult job to do. That being said, over the last 7 years, we've maintained some level of good structure in terms of the finances of the country. We haven't had any major financial shocks, any defaults, or any issues like that. The minister rode through the pandemic, which was very admirable. I think when we look at how our other neighbors in the region has fared, Trinidad, when you look at it, has been doing fairly well compared to most others. Maybe apart from Guyana, who's really at a boost now because of their oil and gas. But Trinidad, in a mature market, we haven't done that badly. When we look at the measures, there are a couple of things that stand out. I mean, the minister was able to save additional 1.1 billion and deposit that into the HSF. He also mentioned that he's going to spend 210 million in the upcoming year to give to health workers. That works out to about roughly 10,000 a month on average. Sorry, 10,000 to each health worker on average. So that comes like a little bonus because it's an extra payment that's one off to those workers. So it comes like a small bonus for those workers for their contribution that they've made to the country during the pandemic. I think there are a couple admirable steps that the Minister of Finance has made, but when you pick apart the budget, there'll always be the critical parts that persons will criticize. Now, the one that stands out the most, and I know is definitely going to affect everyone directly, is the adjustment of fuel prices. I
Yes.
mean,
So
with,
if sorry, if before we can move ahead, since the budget presentation just finished, for those who may not be aware yet, let me just read out the new prices. The price of super gasoline is now $6.97, premium $7.75, diesel $4.41, kerosene $4.50. LPG will remain fixed at $21 for a 20-pound cylinder for domestic customers. According to the minister, they were trying to cap the fuel subsidy, I believe, at $1 billion. He says if the oil price averages 95 US dollars per barrel in 2023, the subsidy will still cost the government $1.45 billion. Now, obviously, the major increase, of course, all the fuels, but diesel in particular, it's the fuel used by transportation companies, public transport, that sort of thing. So I think, yes.
yeah. So diesel is definitely going to impact a lot of various sectors. It's gonna drive up the cost of transport in the retail sector, in manufacturing sectors. It's gonna drive up the cost of general travel for the public. So it's definitely gonna hit the pockets of everyone. When we look at it, so there's always a catch 22, Sarah, because when fuel prices are high, it's there's a challenge for the country, and then when fuel prices are low, there's also a challenge for the country. So the minister has to find the best balance that he could. Now, looking at it from the population's point of view, if they were to say, well, fuel prices were to go down, then maybe the price that they pay at the pump will go down, but then as a country we're going to lose significant amounts of revenue. I personally think that in a oil and gas country where oil and gas is our natural resources, the people of the country should benefit the most from it. So at the end of the day, it has to be looked at where the revenue is going to be improved with the high oil and gas prices. Then the population should benefit from those higher prices in the way of the subsidy, because the subsidy that's given for gas prices and the LPG and all those other things directly affect the entire population. So as a population of people who have natural resources of oil and gas, we should benefit from that. I mean, that being said, the minister also indicated that he can find other ways to direct those funds. So it's a very difficult balancing act. Like I said, I really don't envy the minister of finance in any way. It's an extremely difficult job, but this is one that's gonna definitely garner the attention of everyone.
Now, if I could, I would like to play a little excerpt. It's one of the very few audio bites I was able to pull out of the budget presentation. I think a lot of people would be interested in this. It's about a transport grant that the minister announced. It's one off, I believe. So we could take it in, and then you could give me your thoughts on it as well.
Sure.
23. Give all recipients of social grants, namely recipients of public assistance, disability, food support, and senior citizens pension, a one-time transport grant of $1,000. It should be noted that this transport grant facility is temporary and shall remain in place only insofar as the price of oil remains at elevated levels. This measure will assist 175,000 persons and will cost $175 million and be implemented on or before the end of January 2023.
Now, I think the obvious question for a lot of citizens would be, there are so many people who are on the line but are not benefiting from the state social grants. Where does that leave them when there are certain people who are going to get this one-off grant, but they won't qualify for it?
Yeah. So I think the minister emphasized that the grant will be given to persons who are currently accessing social grants. So I mean, the number that he's given as well, with 175,000 persons, it seems like quite a lot to already be on social grants. So, but I assume that he's included pensioners and those things in that category. I mean, that 175 million is going to also cost the state to administer such a grant. And the kind of work that's going to have to be done to ensure that you're reaching the right people will have added costs. And I would think that it would make sense to just direct that cost into the subsidy and try to cushion the impact of the prices as much as you can to the general public.
Now, I think another point to be noted in terms of an increase, the price to get between Trinidad and Tobago is also going to go up from next year. According to the finance minister, inter-island air travel tickets will now cost $50 more. So a one-way ticket will now be $200 as opposed to $150. With regard to the sea bridge, there is an increase in the standard price from $50 to $75. And previously, persons over 60 would have traveled free on the Sea Bridge. They will now have a charge of $25 one way. So this is another thing that I think persons in Tobago may especially take note of, obviously, because domestic tourism is such a big part of their earnings. How do you expect this to impact their earnings in that regard? Because obviously, while they do get money from the government in the budget, this is also a big part of their bread and butter.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's looking at the adjustments to the prices, and it'll be good to get the feedback from the Tobago chamber as well as the chief secretary. I mean, just before I walked in here, I saw the chief secretary on TV talking about his take on the budget. So it's difficult to say with certainty, but I'm definitely gonna assume that with the increased prices, it may affect persons' interest in traveling to Tobago. Given the other challenges, with international travel, maybe it's a catchment that the minister is hoping that will continue to grow, and there will be more travel generally to Tobago. So he's hoping that he can capture, or claw back a little bit of the subsidy that he gives to the travelers to Tobago as much as he can. But I think that it could potentially impact persons' decisions to travel to Tobago. It's difficult to say with certainty, but you know, it makes sense because the subsidy is quite large on the air bridge as well as the sea bridge. So it makes sense for people to pay a little more because things are generally going up. So cutting back on that subsidy, I think we can use that money otherwise. But again, maybe even the adjustment of that subsidy could have also gone into the fuel subsidy because again it is a wider impact.
So I know we have a lot of topics to discuss, so I'll bring up some of the other major points. We discussed the fuel subsidy as well as the fuel price increase. We've touched on that, and sea bridge increase as well. Public sector negotiations, of course, a major topic these days. We've had teachers being taken to the industrial court over action that they actually planned today. So the minister did touch on public sector wage negotiations, and he says that he is holding firm in the view that 4% over the period 2014 to 2019 is practical and equitable. He says that I apologize for that. He has said that if that is extended to the wider state sector, the additional cost to the government will be about $1 billion per year. They are not budging on that. So according to him, certain unions are calling for 19%. And Mr. Imbud says if that offer is given, that I believe the back pay for public servants could reach the amount that previous budgets have been. So he says he is not budging on that, and he has also promised that if they accept this 4% offer, that the government will find the money and make timely payments in terms of their back pay. So obviously, public sector wages, it's going to be a hot button topic as well, given that our cost of living was already high. It's about to get a little bit higher with the fuel price increase as well. What are your thoughts on this unmovable position, I would like to see, from the
Yeah,
finance
I
minister?
think that the minister seems adamant that the 4% is going to be the final offer by the government. So it'll be interesting to see how the unions deal with it. Maybe in the coming week, before the budget debate starts on Friday, you may see some unions coming to the table and saying, well, they prefer for their members to benefit from whatever funds the government has available to them now and accept that offer. So the coming days will be interesting to watch what happens from the union's perspective. But I think some of the unions may take the harder approach and go to the industrial court. So it'll definitely be interesting to see. The 19%, it may not be realistic. I think with the rate of inflation over the last 6 or 7 years has been fairly well managed by the government during that period. So I don't see the minister giving the 19% to public servants, but definitely there may be some wiggle room from the 4%. So we'll have to see. But from the budget speech, it seems that he's using that 4% as the hard and fast rule. So it'll be difficult to see if they will move from that 4%, or if there will be some small wiggle room. But it's difficult to say where it will end up at. But uh, even if there is wiggle room, I don't see it being much more than 4%.
Given that we do have the fuel increase that we have to contend with now, we have an increase just to go between the countries, 4% for public servants. Will that increase make any difference in terms of easing the pressure on them in their everyday living expenses?
Well, so the 4% will cushion a little bit of the blow, because it's expected that maybe the rate of inflation for the next 12 months may increase. So I think it's currently at 4%. So maybe it might climb by maybe a percentage point or two in the next 12 to 15 months. So that increase will help cushion the blow, as well as there's been an increase in the personal allowance for individuals earning their salaries. So coupled with that, I think the minister indicated that it will be an additional $1,500 in the hands of persons for a year. Now I know $1,500 may not be a large amount, but it could cover groceries for a month or two. For some families. So at the end of the day, it's something, and it's something is better than nothing. But when you look at the other tax that's on the horizon that persons haven't paid for the last 10 years, and that being property tax, I think that it's going to have a wider impact. The property tax is going to have a wider impact. So I think the property tax, when you look at it, compared it to the personal allowance, I think it may be a trade-off. So you can't really say that the personal allowance may have as much of an impact as it had planned to be. But it's again, it's a difficult time, and we're seeing adjustments being made by all governments within the region and internationally. So it's something that when you look at it, it has to be considered something of value for the government to be able to give some of these increased allowances in some ways. But again, the bottom line of the conversation is going to come back down to the fuel prices and the general impact. So when you start to see the price of travel, taxi fares start getting adjusted, when you see the price of food and beverage being affected because there's additional transport prices, then the consumer themselves will feel it more. So it's definitely going to be something that we're going to have to watch. I know that during the course of the day there was some protests outside of Parliament. So it's to see if that will continue through the week until the budget debate, maybe in the next couple of months as well. But the government position has been fairly consistent in the last 7 years. So when the minister has indicated that this is his approach, and he's been very steadfast in his approach, it's difficult to see where they will waver from any such actions that they plan to take.
No, I think some would argue that a major part of easing the burden on citizens locally would be, of course, to strengthen our local economy in general. Small and medium enterprises, of course, were probably hardest hit in the COVID-19 pandemic. He did announce a tax amnesty for those many small businesses who would have suffered a severe loss of income. Do you think that's enough to help at least get those smaller businesses back on track to help strengthen the economy? Because some would say the strength of the economy rests on those small and medium enterprises.
Yes, so the tax amnesty always tends to help generate, so it normally gives a boost of revenue generation in the period of the amnesty. But the real benefits are always felt when amnesties are spread over a number of periods. So if there's one given, if there's a 5-year window in between, or 4-year window in between, you tend to see a bigger boost in revenue. So I think since this government has been in place in the last 7 years, I think this will be the third amnesty I think we would have had for the last 7 years. So whether the impact will be, as beneficial as the prior ones have been, it's difficult to say in terms of revenue generation. Because I think most companies would have gotten their act together in the prior amnesty, which ran up to 2020. So this one is extended for a year, and I think it makes sense because at the end of the day, there were a lot of disruptions during the pandemic period, in terms of difficulty with persons being able to pay their taxes, persons being able to have cash flow to pay their taxes. Debtors may have taken a while to pay. Just being able to transact business would have been difficult. So I think it makes sense for the amnesty to occur now, covering up to 2021, maybe even could have extended it up to the 6 months for 2022, because that difficulty continued through. I think when we relaxed measures was March, April. So it's still difficult to move about freely during 2022, but I think it will definitely help taxpayers clear up their accounts. If they have interest outstanding, those amounts would be waived. If they had penalties outstanding for VAT, you know, late VAT payments or non-VAT payment, those would be waived as well. So it will provide, so it's like an opportunity cost, so that those taxpayers, they wouldn't have to pay those additional penalties from cash flow that they didn't have. So that will be a benefit to them, but whether the impact will be as widely felt as the prior ones, I don't think it will.
Do you think anything more could have been done to help small and medium enterprises get through this difficult period?
It's difficult to say, because the biggest challenge we have with small and medium sized businesses, that a lot of them are not registered and they're not paying the right taxes, or some of them are not paying any taxes at all. So that's the biggest challenge, and the minister is trying to address that by implementing the TTRA and operationalize operationalizing it in 2023. So it'd be interesting to see if that operationalization of the TTRA will have a significant impact in tax collections. So the minister seems to be, boosting the technology that will be available to the government and to the various agencies, so that they can collect those taxes. By next year, we should be able to pay taxes with our debit card and credit card. So those will definitely be beneficial. The man on the street could be able to pay his taxes with his credit card, maybe get some additional points or miles or whatever people choose to use, and it will have a greater benefit to him as well. So it will be something that we have to watch to see if there will be added revenue collection from the implementation of the TTRA. But I think the government is clear that they're making steps to try and improve the tax collection methods by government. And I think if they do that, and if they properly resource the TTRA and have the right people, the right processes, the right systems, it can definitely benefit the country. Just to add, because tax is my core field, and I've heard a lot of clients and individuals talk about the ease of doing things, and I think that's something that the minister needs to look at specifically, especially as it relates to the various government arms, because it's difficult to get simple transactions done in terms of getting a BIR number, or getting a tax clearance. It takes a long time to get simple things done. So I think once he addresses that, we can speed up the process, and hopefully turn the taxes into cash quickly.
Thank you so much. So, if I could go now to the figures themselves. So, the budget is based on an oil price of US $92.50, a gas price of $6 per MMBTU, revenue budgeted at 56.175 billion, and expenditure is a little bit more at 57.685 billion, leaving a deficit of $1.51 billion. So, for the average person, what do these figures mean for us as a country?
Yes. So in terms of revenue generation, I think the minister, he outlined in his speech that he looked at credible sources to peg to determine the price, to peg the budget against. So I think if the current trends continue, we should be able to achieve those prices. Again, the downside of that is really the price that people pay at the pump. But in terms of the deficit, it's one of the lowest deficits that when you compare the deficit to GDP. I think it's one of the lowest percentages in the region. And again, because Trinidad is an oil and gas economy, that would be expected, especially where general prices are high. Looking at the region as a whole, Trinidad is probably definitely doing best when you compare us to our closest neighbors. But yeah, I mean, to have a deficit that low, and then he did indicate that he is spending, giving additional amounts, like the amounts to health workers, and the different grants. Because when you look at the grant for the um, transport grant alone, that's 175 million. When you look at the amount to health workers of 210 million, that in itself could amount to about 400 million, which is a big part of that deficit. So the minister is trying to pump funds in different areas, and I'm sure in terms of the expenditure that he'd indicated there, he's also budgeted for the back pay amounts to public servants and the increases. So that being said, he's dealing with a lot of things during this fiscal year, or he plans to deal with a lot of things during this fiscal year that will, take the additional revenue that we earn and then channel it into the hands of the citizens. Because, with back pay, you have spending power increase. So that in itself fuels the economy to some level, and you have some additional spending. You may see some increase in the construction sector. There may be public servants who have some work to do to their homes, and they've held back on it because cash flow hasn't been available. So when you pay that back pay, a lot of that is going to come back into the economy. So it's definitely something that as a country, we would benefit from having such a small deficit. But yeah, I mean, it's the man on the street. The most important thing for them is really the price that they pay at the pump. And when you try to explain all the big figures and all the details to them, they're not too concerned about that. The important thing is really the price of fuel. So and the price of fuel, some use as an indicator to say, how the citizenry is benefiting from the oil and gas in the country. And it seems that it doesn't feel as though it is benefiting everyone as much as it should.
So we are almost out of time. I feel like if half an hour was not nearly enough time to discuss this budget presentation. But I'm going to ask you a particular question. I'm not sure if you're willing to answer it. If you have to give this budget a grade, what would it be in terms of the impact on the citizens and how beneficial you think it is to them in particular?
Yeah, it's
It's
difficult
a
to
difficult
say,
question to
it's
answer.
difficult to give it a grade, but I mean, I would say it's good. It's not the greatest, but it's not the worst. I think, like I said before, I definitely don't envy the Minister of Finance or the government in the current position that they are in. It's one of the most difficult times for the global economy. And when you look at Trinidad in comparison to our similar, or our closest neighbors in the region, even internationally, we're not doing badly. I mean, one of the biggest issues that plague Trinidad is really crime. And I think if we were to get crime under control, the general feeling of the citizenry would be improved. So at the end of the day, I think it's in the region of good. But it's never gonna please everyone. I don't think the minister could ever please everyone, but it's definitely not a terrible budget.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Arun Seenath. He is a council member at the Institute of Chartered Accountants of TNT and chairman of the ICATT Taxation Committee. Thank you again for joining us in this budget discussion. Like I said before, it was not nearly enough time to discuss this. So if you do want to, feel free to leave your comments below, your questions, and we'll try to, call up some experts in the coming days and see if we could get some answers for you. Maybe settle your mind on certain issues with regard to this fiscal package. Mr. Seenath, do have a good afternoon, sir. Thank you again.
Okay, thanks for having me, Sarah, and all the best.
Thank you again. So that was our post-budget analysis